Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. We are back online, I know, but don't blame me with COVID this time. Blame Christopher Hamill.
Yes,
COVID it up to the max, isn't he? Look at him, but he's back on your screens. How are you feeling, mate?
I'm absolutely riddled with it. Did a LFT yesterday, and the line was so thick that I am preparing to be inside for at least a week.
Yeah, it's not a great feeling, is it, Pato? Any lines for you, or are you safe? Not like that. Any COVID lines for you, or are you safe?
I've done 0 lines today
Okay,
of any
good.
kind. I'm COVID safe at the moment.
Yeah, I would hope so, given it is 9:38 on a Thursday. Right, let's crack on with some of the football in chat, because we're going to be looking at some of your club's most disappointing players this season. It was sent in by Daniel Avin 98, but he just said biggest disappointments of the season. So we're going to go through every Premier League club. We're going to be looking at some of your answers that you submitted to Christopher Hamill on Twitter, and we're going to try and crown the 3 biggest disappointments of the Premier League season at the end. Now, these don't necessarily have to be players, do they? We're kind of tweaking the narrative a bit. Some of them could be incidents, some of them could be managers, some of them could be transfer windows. But we're going to start non-alphabetically today with Manchester City.
Yeah, I thought we could work our way down the table as it currently stands.
I like
but
it.
Starting with Manchester City and Liverpool is pretty difficult because they're having pretty bloody good seasons, aren't they? And after watching Chelsea and Arsenal battle it out midweek, I've got to say I think the gulf in class between the top 2 teams and the rest is even bigger than I anticipated. But we've got a suggestion from @CGC Koning to kick us off, and he said selling Ferran in January could have been a useful option as a striker or a winger. Got nice profit on him, but if we use the money for Haaland, I won't be complaining. So, I mean, they bought the Spaniard for what, £30 million 18 months ago, flipped him for 50, maybe shades of necessity in there FFP wise. But I got to say, when they sold Torres, I thought, did you need to do this? He was a useful rotation option and was contributing in a decent way in that sort of number 9 come wide position, wasn't he?
Yeah. So, the thing is, though, if that has allowed them to then get the march on Haaland and that money has then gone straight into this pot mid-season for Haaland, then I think that's actually a good decision. I like Ferran Torres a lot, but I think Erling Haaland is obviously the guy for Manchester City. So it feels like that money's kind of gone in the pot towards that Haaland. But I think, I'll be honest with you, like you said, it's pretty much impossible, but I would potentially say Jack Grealish here. And that's not me being extremely harsh, because I still think he's been good, but I just don't think he's been quite as exceptional as I thought he was going to be. I think in my preseason predictions, I had Grealish down as my player of the season. And that was obviously foolish. And when I look back at my preseason predictions now, they are absolute turd. But, 4 goal involvements this season, I was expecting a little bit more. And I think you'll definitely see a huge uptick next season because some of his underlying numbers have been great. But I just think output-wise, it's been a slightly disappointing season for Jack Grealish. So I'm leaning towards him. But it's very hard with City, isn't it?
What do you think, Pat? Are you more disappointed in the sale of Ferran Torres, who could have been a promising player for them this campaign, or Jack Grealish's output? You get the deciding vote here.
I'm not really particularly disappointed in either, to be honest with you. I think Ferran Torres, fine. I don't think Man City are missing that much. Turned a really good profit on him. Obviously going to go and get Haaland. Who cares? I think Grealish, you would want more in the top line numbers, but to some degree, that's down to his teammates not finishing the chances he's created. He's in the top 2% for expected assists per 90. He's in the top 2% for key passes per game. He's also top of Europe for progressive carries each match. Number 2 is Vinicius Jr. Number 3 is Messi. He's top of Europe for carrying the ball into the penalty area. Number 2 is Vinicius Jr. This is a guy who's doing a lot for the side. And I think sometimes we get a little bit fixated on the goal and assist numbers when actually there are players who stitch things together. If we were talking about, I wrote a script on this, and when we were talking about a guy like, say, Iniesta in Guardiola's Barcelona, if you said, he only got 4 goals and assists that season, in the season he turned 26, same as Grealish, everyone would have said, yeah, but you're an idiot. Like, I mean, obviously Iniesta does far, far more for the side, except just get goals and assists. That's
Slightly
not just
different
his
role
job.
though. Grealish is a bit more advanced.
Is that
He's
true?
Getting into,
Is that
you
true?
just said he's getting into the penalty area that much. That surely he should be producing more in the way of goals than he did. He put up 16 goal involvements at Aston Villa last season, and obviously wasn't playing with the caliber of players he is now.
But that was a different role. Like, I mean, carrying the ball in the penalty area doesn't mean that you're necessarily getting shots at the end of it. And like I say, he's creating chances, but people aren't finishing them. If he carries the ball into the penalty area and creates a chance and somebody doesn't finish it, that's not entirely on him. Now, don't get me wrong, you definitely want more output from him. But I actually don't think it's that different a role. I think we've got it into our minds that he's meant to be playing as kind of an inside forward, like he ended up being towards the latter stages of his time at Aston Villa. And I don't think that's the way he's played this season. I think he's often been the guy carrying them on. He's taken a lot of touches in the middle third. He's been carrying the ball into the final third a lot, which obviously means he's in the top 2% for carries into the final third, which obviously means he's receiving the ball not in the final third, you know? So I do see it. Like, obviously you'd want more from him.
It's the fee as well, isn't it? It's the £100 million fee. Like, if that was £40 million, we wouldn't be saying anything. It's the size of the fee, I think, is what a lot of people like use as a stick to beat him. And it's I'm not saying he's had a bad season, because I don't think he's had a bad season. I just think it's impossible to find a real disappointment at City. They've been that good, so I'm kind of stabbing in the dark a bit.
You gravitate straight towards that number 9 position, don't you? And you think, City's top goal scorer this season is in the league is KDB, and I think Mahrez a joint on 11, right? And you think that is the obvious hole in their squad, but they're still scoring at a greater rate per 90, domestically speaking, than they were last campaign, even with Gundogan going supernova. They're scoring 2.34 goals per 90 in Premier League play. Yeah. And Mahrez has kind of had to have the best season of his life to facilitate that. I think it's the first time he's got over 20 goals in all competitions. So, yeah, he's obviously playing really, really well. And to go back to the original suggestion, that's maybe helped in terms of justifying the Ferran Torres export. But, yeah, the prospect of adding Haaland to this team, I mean, Jack Grealish is going to get at least 15 assists off that guy, isn't it? It's just stupid.
Let's move on to Liverpool then, going down the table. I mean, this one's just incredibly difficult, isn't it, disappointment-wise, because so good. Yeah, maybe Harvey Elliott's injury at the start of the campaign, because he did start really well, didn't he? That was a bit of a disappointment. But, like, player-wise, nobody's been poor for Liverpool. Literally, to a man, they've been outstanding. Any like, random suggestions?
I mean, the one from our subscribers from @Hayden12 was about the atmosphere at Anfield being partially lost. That's hard to sort of quantify, isn't it? Yeah. None of us go to these games. It's hard for us to open up on. And maybe Liverpool fans can let us know a bit more about that in the comments below. But no, it's just been... They're going from strength to strength at this point of the campaign. And like Pat said, the fact we have a title race now... like, hats off to them for clawing that point deficit back on City, which was at, 15 at one point?
14, I think.
14.
Yeah, but it was in and around that, yeah. Let's go to Chelsea then. Standout, Pat. It's got to be Rom.
Yeah, though I think it's been a really disappointing season all round for Chelsea.
I agree.
Not necessarily for all individuals, Kovacic, Rudiger, like the Reece James when he's been fit, and Havertz lately, really good seasons from them. But generally speaking, this is a side a lot of people tip for the title. This is a side that people tip to have a really good chance of replicating their Champions League success last season. And now out of the Champions League in the quarters to a very poor Real Madrid side. They have got nowhere near the title at any stage of the season. But yeah, definitely if you had to put it on one guy. I mean, that said... Conte hasn't been fit that much this season. It hasn't been amazing when he has been.
I think he's had a massive decline this season, Kante. And I don't know whether it's physical, because he's had so many injury problems that they are starting to catch up with him, and he's not able to utilise that unbelievable engine he's had throughout his career. But even against Arsenal on Wednesday, I thought, this is a painful version of Kante to watch. The drop-off from Kovacic to Kante is considerable now.
I also thought, on midweek against Arsenal, the double pivot of Kante and Loftus-Cheek did neither of them any favours. Like, there was just no tempo in their passing. A lot of the play was very negative. Neither can really break the lines to any consistent degree with their passing either. So I thought there was a lot to be said about that combination of midfielders. But yeah, Kante did look down, didn't he?
Yeah, and the thing about Rom, though, just to take it back to like the main suggestion, is I really don't know what he does now. Like, to be locked into such a long-term contract on such a huge fee, on such big wages at his age, like, I honestly don't see him breaking into that forward line with Kai Havertz currently playing as well as he is. And you know what? Timo Werner's even playing really well at the moment. Like, I just don't see the space for Lukaku, and I don't see how he gets a move away from the club either, because nobody's going to pay that big of a fee for him at that age on that wage. So I think he's a bit stuck, isn't he?
It did feel.
Yeah, it's a really bad one.
It did feel like his last chance for redemption was a huge performance against Arsenal, right? But the fact he was just completely nullified by not a makeshift defence, but Ben White at right back, Rob Holding at centre back. I think Romelu Lukaku only had one shot before he was dragged off, didn't he? Just looked really poor. What is it, 5 goals in 13 starts, which doesn't sound too bad, but then he's made a bunch of substitute appearances and done nothing with those cameos, really. Fared okay in cup competitions as well. But the weird thing is, it's contrasted really starkly with his international form, where he's still averaging a goal a game. Like, he'll go away for Belgium and look great again and come back for Chelsea and look a shadow of his former self. He's starting to look like the Romelu Lukaku in that last campaign in Manchester, isn't he? Where his sort of numbers now are very reminiscent of that ill-fated campaign, like roughly 2 shots per 90, very average creatively, laying on just over 1 key pass per 90 for his teammates. Probably unfortunate not to have a couple more assists. Like, I do think expected assists has him down at around 2, but bang on in terms of meeting his underlying numbers goals-wise. So I think he's slightly overperformed, 5 goals against an XG of 4.6, and it doesn't look like he's going to dig himself out with the way that Chelsea play. He just looks like such a poor fit that every time I watch him, I'm just so surprised that Thomas Tuchel sanctioned the spend that he did. Like, I don't know what were his plans to incorporate him into the system from the off, but yeah. Looks pretty bleak.
That I think is a really important point. Like, so is the disappointment here? Yes, part of it is Lukaku's form, but to me, the disappointment is that Chelsea spent all this money, and the manager had no idea of what he was going to do with Lukaku or what he could reasonably expect from Lukaku. Like, I do think that this one is on Tuchel. I do. Like, with Lukaku, you know that you're not getting a guy who's going to finish every chance that gets in front of him. And you also know that you're not getting, like, one of the world's best back-to-goal strikers. You know exactly what you're getting. He's 28. Like, this is not an unknown quantity. You know the player you're getting. We all knew the player that Chelsea were getting. Like, nobody was surprised that Lukaku has turned up and look. Like Chris says, those numbers are very similar to what they were at Man United. Like, this is who he is. And yet, at Inter Milan, somebody was able to figure out a plan for getting more out of him than playing this particular way. So to me, it's one of those things where I think Lukaku takes a bit of the blame, but I actually think Chelsea and Tuchel take more of the blame. And I think you could argue, actually, that some of Chelsea's squad construction maybe is a factor here as well. Like, that could be seen as one of the disappointments of the season. The fact that Chelsea are running out guys like Sarr and Chalobah in defence, while seeing Gay and Tomori be pretty amazing out at other sides. That, to me, is a really big failure. The fact that Loftus-Cheek is getting regular minutes in midfield at this stage, I think, is pretty horrifying. And the fact that their attack hasn't been that great all season, despite having incredible depth and having a really good attacking manager, these are issues.
Yeah, let's move it on, though, to Tottenham, another team with a fair few issues themselves throughout the season, I think it's fair to say. Very hot and cold, aren't they, even under Antonio Conte? I mean, there's a lot of names you could pick in here. My immediate thought, the first name that popped into my head randomly was Brian Hill. Like, what's happened with that transfer? He was so promising in La Liga, and just, I didn't even got a sniff at Spurs, did he? And then I kind of was thinking the players that have headed out on loan, and Ndombele in particular, I actually thought I was quite excited to see him under Antonio Conte. Could Conte finally be the guy that could unlock Ndombele at Tottenham, given that he did try to sign him at Inter Milan, didn't he, at times? So Those were my first thoughts, but I've seen the suggestion here from Tottenham Hotspur comps of Sergi Reguilon's inability to develop into a top-level wing-back under Antonio Conte, which I thought was quite interesting. What are your thoughts on that one, Hamster?
Yeah, it is interesting because he's not, as a neutral, you wouldn't necessarily pick him out first and foremost as the biggest disappointment in their season, right? But maybe because Spurs fans had really high expectations in terms of what Conte could do with Reguilon, given that it appeared, even under Mourinho, he had the raw ingredients to be a really good Premier League fullback. Mix that with Conte's sort of pedigree of turning average to good players into really, really good fullbacks, a la Victor Moses. Maybe they're expecting this guy to sort of unlock that left-hand side, which has been problematic for them throughout this season. And it's not been the case because there's been various points in the season where he's been usurped by Doherty, Ryan Sessegnon prior to that injury. I mean, he's still featured in around 25 Premier League games, so he's still an important first-team player. It's just that he's been fairly inconsistent, but for the most part looks wholly upgradable. I mean, his output is very decent, actually. 5 goals and assists. Only one away from equaling a career best. I think that was at Sevilla a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Expected goals and assists, thinks he should be closer to 7, and that's creeping towards elite output for a fullback. So unlike maybe Emerson, on the other flank, he is okay when he's in the final third, and I think that's reflected in the 2.2 shot creating actions he puts up per 90, which puts him in the top 25% of fullbacks across Europe. Like his expected assists of 0.16 per game, that puts him in the top 15% for fullbacks across Europe's top 5 divisions. So there are decent numbers there going forward, but defensively does look pretty average. Like, it's a tall order, isn't it, to be a great fullback under Conte, because you've got to be a great two-way fullback. And I don't think on either flank, neither player is really doing that. They're either good at like one thing, giving up on the other, for example. But yeah, he's hardly a prime Danny Rose at the minute, is he? But I'd probably say Emerson would draw more of my criticism or ire than Sergi Reguilon.
Yeah, I mean, what did they pay for Emerson? 23, was it? Or something like that? And I think Barcelona fans, when that happened, were kind of like, "What? How's this happened?" I agree with Emerson. I think both of the wing-backs are going to be looked to be upgraded in the summer, to be honest with you. I think they were trying to upgrade that right wing-back slot in January, weren't they? And it was only kind of Matt Doherty's excellence and the fact that they missed out on Adama Traore that they've kind of managed to stave it off. I think in the long run, I know that Emerson's still very young, but I think they'll try and upgrade that wing-back position in the summer. Pat, let's go to Arsenal, your boys. I mean, where do we want to start here? I want to throw a name at you. I want to throw Lacazette into the mix here. I think he's was 2 non-penalty goals this season in the Premier League. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but Nketiah must have equalled it last night in, 70 minutes of football or whatever. But I don't know. I think Lacazette's been one of the holes in this Arteta side.
I don't think he's been a hole, but he's an upgradable position.
Yeah.
He's still our top assister. He's got 11 goals and assists in the Prem. Like, it's not exactly terrible. It's
not awful, no. But it's just. I don't know.
Well, yeah, except that I think that some of it is this idea of like the striker is meant to score the goals, and I do see that. I mean, like like I say, it is a position you can upgrade, but Arsenal have also been a lot better with Lacazette in the lineup than they were with Aubameyang. True. So, the team is much better now than it's been at any point since Arsene Wenger left the club. And Lacazette is a part of that. And I mean, you have to bear in mind here that like Arsenal fans don't know anything about anything. Like they're wrong about literally everything they could possibly be wrong about. Like, our fans will constantly talk about how Eddie Nketiah is a championship player, but like the guy might not be particularly elegant on the ball, but he's always good at finding scoring positions. And what did he do last night? He does it again. People say Lacazette, he's like, they say he's like out of shape and lazy, but like we press far more efficiently now with Lacazette up front, even in his 30s, than we have done again at any point since Wenger left. This is not an argument that he's perfect, but I mean, I don't know. To me, bigger disappointments are letting a bunch of guys go in January and not strengthening in any way. Because that is the thing that might cost Arsenal top 4. I mean, look, it's hard to say that there's a big disappointment in Arsenal's season because we were talking about them as being a 5th to 8th place side.
Yeah.
It now looks like 5th is probably the least they can expect. It would take quite a few bad things to happen for them to finish lower than that. And if they get top 4, Arsenal fans cannot complain about a thing. That's amazing for them. And they're a good team now.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the season, I was like, Arsenal are whatever. Now I think Arsenal are pretty good. And they've got a really young squad. And you can see the problem positions that need to be upgraded. That's far better than I thought Arsenal would. That's a better position than I thought Arsenal would find themselves in at this stage of the season. So from that point of view, I think we've got no right to complain. We should be very happy. But disappointment overall. I mean, obviously Tomiyasu hasn't been very fit. Tierney hasn't been very fit. Partey hasn't been very fit. Those are all issues. But yeah, I think the fact that we pretty much gutted our squad depth in January. And I think actually there were a bunch of players who, because they had contracts winding down, could have been had for a pittance. And we didn't just go and get one. You know, you look at like Zakaria going to Juventus for 7 mil or whatever it was. Grealish, we're linked to him in the summer, who'll be going on a free transfer. You think, was that not worth maybe putting in a few million in January when there's a good player who does have value for the future and can really help you in the run-in? Because if anything ends up costing Arsenal in the run-in, it will be squad depth. So yeah, I think that's a pretty significant failure.
Yeah. Next up, then we've got Man United. I mean, Jake Ford has put down Varane here, and like Varane on the list of disappointments is so low compared to like 15 of the Manchester United squad to be laughable, in my opinion. I don't know. The whole season you could have here, couldn't you? Really, and 90% of the squad. You could have Ralph Rangnick's time as a coach. You could have Rashford, Maguire, obviously. I think Maguire would probably be mine. I do think he was one of the best defenders at the Euros. People will laugh at that, but he was so solid. I think he was one of Man United's most important players towards the back end of last season. When he picked up his injury before the Europa League final at the end of last season, United fans were saying, this is a disaster. He's been so good. And his confidence is just shot to pieces. The back line is a disaster. I think we conceded 1.5-ish goals a game this season. We've conceded more goals than Burnley, man. Like, we can't defend in transition. We can't defend in a low block. We can't defend as a high line. We are just sliced through like butter. It's so bad at the moment. It's just been... It's right now the worst I've felt as a United fan. It's just the most disappointing campaign I can ever remember, given that we finished second last season, got to a European Cup final, obviously the Europa League, but that would have been a big trophy for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and this season, just an astronomical disaster.
Yeah, people hone in on the defence as well, don't they? And while there has obviously been some torrid performances back there, I think we are fast forgetting that defence is just regularly exposed by a complete black hole in midfield as well. Like, it's not just the defence which is standout bad at Manchester United, it's the complexion of the whole team, isn't it, from top to bottom. To answer Jake Ford's, or to go back to Jake Ford's suggestion of Varane, I do think a fit Varane would have helped to an extent, but not significantly. Like, he's missed 16 games through illness and injury. Looked fairly consistent in the 16 he did perform in the Premier League. But yeah, I don't know how many of those 48 goals he prevents with a sort of already overperforming goalkeeper in the net as well. Like you said, that's more goals conceded in league play than Brighton, Palace, Villa, Burnley. So yeah, it's just a complete mess, isn't it? Like, I was doing a little bit of reading. 6 academy graduates in the squad, which is good, but 21 players signed by 5 different managers. This is now just a really expensive version of what's been happening at Everton over the last 5-6 years. And I was going to ask you, Tomlinson, what is the first 3 things you do as Ten Hag? Because... I mean, even one of your star performers this season, David De Gea, like, you look at what Onana does for Ten Hag at Ajax, and even they aren't simpatico, right? Like, can he even, starting at the very base of your team, can he even stick with someone like David De Gea? Because I think essentially when you play David De Gea, you're starting with a man down and build up, aren't you?
I agree De Gea's a problem, but I think he's quite low down the list of problems. I mean, I think you're probably going to see 11 players leave United in the summer. I think this is, there 7 or 8 out of contract. I think you'll probably see at least another 3 go, be it on loan or on permanent deals that are extremely likely to leave now, which is a huge overhaul. Like if it's a 25-man squad, you're left with 15 players in the team before you start signing names. Like, I think that is a job in its own. Honestly, to gel even 4 new players into a squad is tough. To gel 8 players, like Rangnick was saying midweek, that is an incredibly difficult job. Obviously the wages are going to get freed up massively. I think there's something like £1.5 million a week being freed up in wages for players leaving on contracts this summer. So United are going to have a bit of money to spend, but I think gelling
That's
players
never been a problem, has it? Not having money to spend.
Fixing the mentality of that, fixing the confidence is so high on the priority list. Players that are decent footballers are having horrendous times of it, man. Bruno is clearly a talented player, but just looks at the moment like he can't pass to a teammate. It's just so far off it. I don't know, man. There's just so many problems that I just can't be asked to get into it. I feel so disillusioned as a United fan, to be honest with you. If I had to pick 3 things, I couldn't do it. Honestly, I couldn't do it. It's just so many problems. Let's move on. Let's move on to West Ham. To Samuel Bentley's suggestion, who says the most disappointing thing was a failure to sign a striker. So do we agree with that? Is there any other suggestions people want to say?
I mean, they did buy a forward in Vlasic, and they've had pretty good output from Antonio and from Bowen as well. I mean, you don't just have to get all your goals from a striker anymore. I actually find it hard to think of a disappointment for West Ham.
Yeah, me too.
They could easily win the Europa League and be in the Champions League next season, having won a trophy. I mean, to me, that's amazing. And I think they play really good football. I think they're a really enjoyable side. I don't know. I find it very hard to see any downside for West Ham. Their fans look like they are having the time of their lives in Europe this season. And so they should. So, I don't know. I don't really want to bring down the West Ham parade. I think that it should just be celebrated.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned him there, maybe Vlasic. It was a big big old fee for such little output and such little playing time, wasn't it? I think it was 25-ish million pounds. He's made 6 Premier League starts. I think he scored once. And they were obviously kind of in for Jesse Lingard potentially at the same sort of time, and that kind of fell through. So maybe Vlasic, but I agree with you, Pat. Let's fly through a few of these then. Wolves, Hamster, Lems says Trinquao.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel for Trincao because he's come from a ball-dominant side who play 4-3-3 into a side that prioritises clean sheets, defensive solidity, and they play a very conservative 3-4-3, don't they? Lost a bunch of their progression when Adama Traore, ball progression when Adama Traore left the club, so not exactly great at getting up the pitch at pace at current, and it's not just Trincao that's suffering. I think Podence's output's pretty average. Actually, I was looking earlier, I think Connor Cody is the 4th highest goal scorer at the club after Jimenez, Hwang and Ruben Neves. And I assume if you take penalties out of the equation, then a few of them probably wouldn't fare as well. But yeah, 2 goals and assists for a guy who they have an option to buy for 25 mil isn't a great soundbite, is it? But still has some very redeeming qualities. Is a very good dribbler. I think in the top 6% actually for wingers in terms of dribbles completed per 90 on a very healthy 3.1. And he's at least substituted some of his output or flair or attacking impetus, whatever you want to call it, with hard work. He's putting up 23 pressures per 90 when he does play, which is pretty monumental. And he's completing around 3 tackles and interceptions, which for a winger are, again, fairly healthy. So he's subscribed to Bruno Lage's methodology, I guess. But maybe, just at the cost of some of his natural game. I think we see this quite a lot with sort of middling sides who buy flair players from other divisions, don't we? That they struggle when they first come to the Premier League. There's some conditioning that needs doing. It's a quicker division. Maybe they're playing on slightly more structured sides than they were in other divisions. So I think he's still a good player. I think there's been a tough adaptation period for him. Is he worth 25 mil? No. Are Barcelona going to be open to negotiation? Yes. Like, didn't Aston Villa just say to them, "Oh, we don't fancy paying 32 mil for Coutinho anymore. Like, what are you going to give us him for?" I imagine they can do that with Trincao if they get him for like 10 to 15. I think it's still
swap deal, mate.
I think it's still with Adama Traore, but I think you'd want some cash along with that as well. But I think he's probably worth keeping hold of. But yeah, I don't know what more there is to say about him. He's just, no one's really fared that well attacking wise, have they? It's just, fortunately, they've been good as a defensive unit.
Yeah, agreed. Let's go to Leicester. I mean, disappointing season as a whole, really. The underlying numbers have been a disaster, haven't they? But I think I was looking today, the expected points total, they're fourth bottom by expected points. I couldn't believe it. Alex Moore says Boubakary Samari. I kind of want to say Brendan Rodgers here. I feel like he's really struggled to progress the side forward. I don't know. Feels flat for Leicester in nearly every aspect.
Yeah, well, I don't just want to. Well, I'd like to hear Pat's opinion on this, but I think what we said about Romelu Lukaku and Thomas Tuchel, I think holds true here with Boubakary Samare and Brendan Rodgers. Like, if you're going to buy a 22-year-old from a club that's just won the league, I think the onus is on you to incorporate him well, and I don't think that's necessarily happened. Probably because Leicester have had to chop and change a little bit more than they would have envisaged because of all the injuries, etc. There is mitigating circumstances with Leicester's defence. Like, you have to kind of overlook how bad they've been defensively to an extent, but still, like, I don't think Samare's been implemented into the side particularly well. And you know what, Tielemans hasn't been good in recent weeks, and I thought he might get his opportunity here, short of like an injury I might be missing. But yeah, I think you can't really blame solely the player in this particular circumstance.
Yeah, I think when everyone's underperforming, you have to look at the manager. Like Chris says, you have to factor in injuries as well. And then they're a really big factor this season. But, you know, even stuff like Tielemans not signing a new contract, Daka and Iheanacho not playing more, despite the fact they have the best underlying numbers in the squad. Neither one of those has got 1,000 minutes in the league yet. Harvey Barnes is down at like 0.39 expected goals and assists per 90. Now, I mean, when the whole side's playing badly, that's not just on him, but that's a bit of a disappointment because we were looking at this club a year or two ago and saying, wow, if these guys keep progressing, then this is the making of a really solid Champions League side. So I don't know. I do put most of it down to the manager because I still think even when there have been injuries this season, I still have looked at that squad and thought, well, this is better than a ton of the squads in the Premier League that are performing better. You know, like there's a difference between saying the defense is worse than last year because it's had some injuries and saying the defense is now one of the worst in the league because of those injuries. Like, that shouldn't happen in my mind. But
I was just
a bad season all round for Leicester.
I was just about to say Soyuncu defensively. Like, it was it like 18 months ago we were talking, like, people were saying, oh, Soyuncu's just sensational, like, look at him, he could take a move to Manchester City, stuff like this. He's so far off it at the moment. I don't know what's happened. Maybe it's the absence of Wesley Fofana alongside him, who obviously had a horrendously bad time with injury this season. But Soyuncu, he's just off a cliff, hamster.
Well, I think instead of Fofana, it's been his form or lack of has been more dependent on a lack of Johnny Evans, right? I think he's just one of those players that needs a leader, an organizer, a communicator next to him, or he lets his natural sort of temperament take over. A little bit like an Otamendi company dynamic, for example. But we're now looking at a bit of a defensive rebuild in the summer. I think that the recruitment of Vestergaard pretty unforgivable and sounds out a manager who still struggles to recruit on the defensive end. Like, even Fofana coming good as quick as he did, can you really credit the manager with that? I don't know, but yeah, bounce back next year. Be positive.
All right, let's move on to Brighton then. Official Tiggy says Neil Mopay. JHN Brighton over Albion said it's hard to think of anything in particular for Brighton, but not incorporating Caicedo quicker into the team. Potentially, he's been sensational recently. Moses Caicedo. Pat, thoughts on Mopay from Official Tiggy?
I mean, I don't really see it. Like, Mopay, he's scored at exactly the rate expected goals would predict this season. I think he's got 7.96 XG and he scored 8. Like, what do you want? Whereas actually the rest of the team has really underperformed. People like Morda, Solly March, like there are a bunch of people around the squad who've underperformed XG by 1 or 2 or even 3 goals. And as a result, I think Brighton have got something like 38, 39 expected goals in the league, but have only scored 29. Now, I understand people feeling like we should have upgraded Mopé like a few years ago, because clearly Potter isn't entirely convinced. The fans aren't entirely convinced, and getting a forward who they trust to play every week would be an upgrade than a guy who they don't entirely trust. But has he been a problem when he's been on the pitch this season? Not really. To me, it's a bigger problem that they've still had to give a bunch of minutes to guys like Lallana and Welbeck, who I like both of them, but come on, at this point, Brighton should have moved beyond this. And to be honest, when I look at this team this season, I do kind of think this is like, it's pretty much a midfield driven side. Like Cucurella is in midfield most of the time. And then you've got guys like Bissouma, Mwepu, Caicedo. Like these are guys who are really driving the side on. And I think that the attack is just kind of in need of 2 or 3 major additions. I think Morder is pretty promising, but I think they need to go out in the summer and just buy a few forwards and really turn it over, because it's pretty thin right now. But they'll be fine. What do Brighton hope for in a season? They'll be fine. Yeah. They play pretty good football. They've had some really great signature victories. So
they're on track for a record finish, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So a couple more signings
at the start of the season. I actually think the plan of not signing more defensive reinforcements has come back to bite them. Obviously, to let Ben White go and replace him only with Shane Duffy coming back from Celtic on loan has, throughout the course of the season, proved to be a slight mistake, given Webster's injury problems pretty much saw them go 7 games without a win, didn't they? Brentford, I don't really think there is one, is there, at Brentford? I mean, to be in the position they're in their first season in the Premier League, I think is extremely impressive. Pat, you got any suggestions for Brentford?
I mean, they can be a little bit disappointed, I think, with kind of their goalkeeping situation, because they're about 10 points down on what expected points would suggest, and I think when it comes to their goalkeeping output, they are I think they've conceded 7 more goals than you'd expect, which is like the 3rd worst in the Prem.
But did that not happen when David Raya got injured, and then they were scrambling all over the place, weren't they?
Well, yeah, they played Lursel a couple of games. They played Fernandez. I think he got about 1,000 minutes, and Raya's had about 1,700, I think. So yeah, they've had to mix and match. That's a bit disappointing for them, because if they'd actually kept that, I think they're like 7th or 8th in the table by expected points. But that doesn't matter. They're going to stay up, and actually, they might be kind of glad that Tony and Burma, like, nobody's had such an incredible season that they're going to have to fend off huge bids for these players. Like they can probably retain that whole squad next season. I mean, Tony's linked in a bunch of places, but I don't know if anyone will pay Brentford enough to let him go. So I think they'll be like, our aim this season was to stay up, to kind of continue to play the way we want to play, to evolve the squad, and they'll probably go and get 3 or 4 interesting players this summer. They could be a bit disappointed that none of their signings have been particularly have had much of an impact. I mean, like Onyeka, Wissa, these guys are about 1,000 minutes each. Eriksen has, but I mean, of course, whether he can do it over the course of a whole season, whether they can keep hold of him next summer, those are questions. But they would want to have had more minutes from Wissa and Onyeka and Aya as well, I think. But Brentford are fine. They don't care. They'll keep their manager. They'll keep their players, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Southampton. Stone's official says Adam Armstrong, but he's not played much because of Broha. We did have high hopes for Adam Armstrong, though, didn't we? I think he had the highest non-penalty expected goals and assists coming out of the Championship last season. And he actually started okay, didn't he? But he's just put up 4 goals and assists this season. So I think it's a fairly legitimate shout. Because he only really features, doesn't he, in that 4-4-2 with Che Adams. Haven't seen him utilised too much up there with Broha.
No. Better shot numbers and expected goal numbers than Broya, though.
Yeah, but just not enough minutes, really.
No.
Not enough of an impact.
I think he's having a similarly tough adaptation period that Che Adams went through when he first moved from Birmingham, right? And we saw him put up sort of 6 goals and assists in his first season. I think Adam Armstrong will probably finish on those numbers if he continues to get rotated in and out of the squad. But the problem with Armstrong is he's 25. So I think there was probably more pressure for him to hit the ground running than someone like Adams, who arrived at 22, 23. 28 goals in the Championship last season, shaking out to just 2 in the Prem. It is a little underwhelming, particularly as they paid 15, which we know, I don't know if that's the case under the new administration, but under the past administration, that was the top fee they were willing to pay for a player, right? So yeah, I think Hasenhüttl's system is probably one of the harder ones to adapt to in a mid-table side. So maybe we'll see the best of him next season. Like, I can't think of a player who's really hit the ground running at Southampton under him. I mean, there's obviously a couple.
Tino, Livramento.
Tino, and then maybe Salisu. But like, there's been a recurring theme at Southampton where I think most players have taken sort of a year to bed in, haven't they?
Yeah.
I might be missing some really obvious candidates, but never mind.
Let's keep going down the table to Crystal Palace, who, although they've had a fantastic season, are still in 14th, only 4 points ahead of Leeds, who've had a bit of a catastrophe. So, are there any disappointments we want to raise here?
Well, at CPFC_Triggs has said Vieira's use of players like Eze and Edouard, and I don't know, I missed the last few Palace games, but it does feel like, with Mateta, with Benteke up there, he's altered his game a little bit from the opening the first half of the season, just to be a little bit more physical up there, have a little bit more of a focal point, bring his wingers into play a little bit more. Maybe there's been a bit of adaptation there, and it's not quite as flary as we first thought. But then, Elise's there, Zaha's there. They're probably flare enough, aren't they? I think he's just trying to strike the right balance across that front six, the midfield 3 and the forward 3, and he's probably got it right more times than wrong, I would say, with Vieira.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pat, anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, like, Edouard has been great when he's played. I think Eze was coming back from a serious injury, of course, in the autumn. So, and in the way that Vieira has used Olise, you can see that this is a manager who's very concerned with protecting his players and with bedding them in the right way. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. And I think Palace, they're staying up and they can go and deal with their 2 or 3 real problem areas next summer, because they addressed a lot of issues last year. So, I mean, Palace, as overhauls go, this was a team that was absolutely heading for the Championship.
Yeah. Not
a single doubt about it. And now they're looking up. So that's great.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the transition to a new style of football under Vieira it's pretty seamless. As revolutions go, it's pretty seamless. Newcastle then. Master Contender says not sacking Steve Bruce earlier. They are on absolute fire at the moment, Newcastle. Any players that we want to shout out as potentially being slightly underwhelming?
I mean, it'd be hard for us to say, like, to agree with Master Contender in terms of not sacking Steve Bruce earlier, and then also say, some of the players have underwhelmed, because like we've seen some transformations under Eddie Howe, haven't we? Like Fabian Schär, for example, he was sort of frozen out the squad in the opening exchanges of the season, and now he's a crucial first team player. He's getting a tune out of Joel Linton, out of I thought it's multiple players. I think I just agree with Master Contender here. Like there was more to be squeezed out of that team, and then an unprecedented thing happened, and the new manager gets to spend a bunch of money. I don't know how you apply a fair level of analysis to that.
Yeah, I agree. I love how we've just been to the order of the table, by the way. We were like going in table order. I'm sure like Newcastle were like 11th. But yeah, we'll just slide them in wherever. Apologies, Newcastle fans, for the slight delay on your team there. Let's go to Aston Villa then, because I'll be honest, this has been a disaster recently. Villa, a disaster. What is going on here? They're all falling apart. I mean, you could pick so many players from this side, I think, that have been disappointments this season. Most of the signings in the summer, like Leon Bailey, Danny Ings, just the back line, Emi Martinez. Like, I don't know. This season's just been a disaster, isn't it? It's just, do we even pick one player, or do you just say the squad as a whole?
Yeah, I actually think they've been better under Gerrard. They've certainly been better under Gerrard than they were under Smith. The underlying numbers are better. Bailey's like 600 minutes in the league.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. Though that said, when they signed him, we did say, this is a signing you make on the understanding that he's probably going to be injured kind of a lot. You're taking a risk, on the possibility that you might get a great player. So if he's fit next season, we may feel very differently. I guess, Buendia's been very disappointing. 6 goal contributions, not great. Ings, I think, was a stupid signing. I thought it was stupid at the time. I still think it's stupid. They massively overpaid for him. I don't really know why they did it. I know that a load of people liked it because every English pundit loves it when an English player gets signed. But I think it made no sense for the setup of the squad. I think the midfield's been pretty decent, actually. I don't know, man. I still think that there are good minerals in that team. But yeah, it's just a bad year. That said, you lose a superstar player, you tend to have at least one season where the whole team is like, what the fuck do we do now? Because last year, the plan was give the ball to Jack Grealish and make him do something. And that was a really good plan. And then you lose Grealish and you're like, oh shit, there's a Grealish-shaped hole in this team. So I think it's understandable that they are still evolving past that. I'm still quite optimistic about them next year, but this season was just wheel spinning, man. It was really disappointing.
I will say that Ramsey's been very good, and I think Matty Cash has been fairly consistent throughout the campaign. Other than that, I don't think there's any. If we're going to flip it, I don't think there's any other standout players. Maybe Coutinho since he joined, but yeah.
Last week we did something similar. We said kind of, didn't we? Matty Cash, John McGinn, Ramsey, Coutinho. Let's go to Leeds then, because they've had their fair share of problems this season. I think first and foremost, fitness and injuries incredibly disappointing, given that they've seemed to have happened to all of their best players. Like Calvin Phillips has just missed the majority of the season, Bamford, Cooper. I think injuries for me would be incredibly disappointing for Leeds because they've just not been able to have a consistent spine of the side. But overall, Bielsa's departure, Wildrum suggests. Any other shouts here?
Yeah, maybe not keeping Patrick Bamford fit. I mean, hard to criticise them for that, but maybe not having a better plan B for him being out of the team. I don't think Rodrigo has been the goal-scoring threat that they anticipated when they paid all that money for him.
Yeah.
So he's been a little bit of a disappointment. Even in link-up, I'm still not entirely convinced what he's bringing to the side. But yeah, I think for us, mercifully, we've actually covered a lot of the remaining teams quite extensively, haven't we? We've done a how to fix on Everton, which are next. We've probably spoke about the relegation scrap a fair bit as well. So should we just rattle off the last few in quickfire fashion? Not to disrespect those fan bases, but I think we've been going for near enough 50 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Everton, for me, it's Michael Keane. I think just him or Rondon. Personally, any other suggestions?
In everything, mate. Everton have been the worst run club in the Premier League this summer. This season.
If they get relegated, it will be an unbelievable catastrophe.
Titanic.
Burnley sacking Dyche.
I've not read into that, but that must be a breakdown in the sort of relationship between him and the new American owners, right? Rather than anything that they're seeing on the pitch. Hard one to fathom.
Don't get it. I mean, even when he was a Championship manager, I think in the 2 seasons he spent down there with Burnley, he only lost 10 games across 2 seasons. So, not sure there's that many better candidates to bring them back up. Watford, hiring Ranieri? I don't know.
Yeah,
just been a total catastrophe.
Not getting Roy Hodgson out of retirement quicker.
Norwich, Billy Gilmore maybe. I think a few people had slightly higher hopes of Billy Gilmore than has been shown this season.
Well, and for years everyone was just like, Norwich has got so much young talent, and it's like, when is Max Aaron's going to be great? When is that going to happen? He's 22 now. I mean, Todd Cantwell, has he been injured all season?
He's gone to Bournemouth.
Yeah, he's gone.
Really? Did that happen?
Yeah.
Oh, was that in January? That's how little I noticed what was going on there. But yeah, Norwich are just crap, and it's just how they basically are going to keep going down and hoping they can come back up. And at some stage, hope they just hit on the right signings and stay in the division. But Norwich are just bush.
I like their sporting directors were Stuart Rebber, but I mean, they spent a lot of money in the summer and don't have an awful lot to show for it, do they?
Mate, they spent the 11th most in Europe in the summer.
Crazy.
Norwich.
That's crazy.
Which is just
Yikes.
nuts. But right, let's do a couple of quick fires then. Dubman Rahul says, out of contract players that suit a top 6 side. Any suggestions here?
I mean, like, there are plenty of players around. You've obviously got Grealish, who I talked about before. He's been linked with Arsenal. I think that would make a lot of sense. Good progressive passer, really good defensive numbers. Boubacar Kamara similarly would work for... He could work for Spurs. He could definitely work for United. He could probably work for Arsenal as well. Just really huge defensive output. A decent progressive passer and can play in the back line.
We said Kramaric to Brighton as well, didn't we? I think that was one of our suggestions a few weeks ago that I quite liked.
Yeah, but it's not a top 6 side, is it? I mean, like Spurs
Right,
going to
true.
need a backup striker, and actually somebody coming in on a free on big wages is probably the way to do it. So Kramaric, is Belotti out of contract?
I think he is.
I think he is. Yeah, so those kind of guys. I mean, I don't think he'd be a perfect fit, but I think that he'd be pretty good. So I think actually this is a really amazing free agent window. It's a good opportunity to pick up some players at far below market rate. So I'm quite excited. And obviously, you know, who's the main out of contract player who's going to perfectly suit a Premier League top 6 club? I mean, I could see it. Look, Liverpool signing Mbappe. That would be great.
There you go. Love it. Okay, the next one. Sean Dyche. Where's his next job? Says Ross K. Hamster.
Oh wow! Maybe one of the Premier League clubs that goes down and subsequently sacks their manager. Maybe a glorious return
Back to Watford.
Return to Watford.
I think that he's either going to have to wait for the first sacking next season in the Premier League, which will surely see his name chucked into the mix, or he's going to have to go to one of the higher level Championship sides that's underperformed. Like, I could see him doing a very good job at a West Brom. If I was West Brom, I'd be breaking the bank tomorrow to get Sean Dyche through the door. Like, I like Steve Bruce, but I think that Sean Dyche is a considerable upgrade, and West Brom should be doing much better than they currently are 12th in the table. So I could see a club like West Brom, if he doesn't get that first Premier League job, moving for him.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Wilder's went to Middlesbrough, right? And I feel like that's probably a similar situation that Sean Dyche finds himself in. So it might be an upper end Championship side. I agree. Yeah.
Let's do a personal question then. This one from Major Crib, who says, favourite flavour of gum? What kind of question is that?
I don't know, but I get a lot of criticism from my girlfriend for going for like strawberry.
Oh, you're always
flavour.
chewing gum as well. It does my fucking head in, honestly.
That is what you are like, Chris, though. Like, sometimes halfway through a call, you will just be eating, like, cereal out of a bowl.
Really unbelievable, honestly.
Because you lot are boring. So strawberry to answer his question.
No, that's a nonce gum, mate. That's strawberry flavoured gum. What? You can't be 28 and eating strawberry gum.
Strawberry Orbit.
Mint like everybody else.
Do they still make juicy fruit? Juicy fruit.
They do,
There
but
go.
you shouldn't be eating juicy fruit.
I don't have gum. Like, why should I not be eating juicy fruit?
Because it's specifically made for children, juicy fruit.
You are one of those people who thinks that, like, you're the reason that managers have to stand on the sideline, like, getting in the pissing rain because, like, they won't be perceived as real men if they carry an umbrella.
No, I'm not.
Like,
But juicy
why are
fruit
you so
loses its
why are you
flavour
so-
after 10 seconds. It loses its flavour after 10 seconds.
Joe, why are you so insecure in your masculinity that you're unwilling to choose strawberry flavoured chewing gum when it would give you pleasure?
Boom.
Because it tastes like crap and it loses its flavour after approximately 30 seconds.
So
Then
your
you're
problem-
just chewing
But
a
that
lump
is
of
your problem
rubber.
is
So that
for
isn't what you
children
said.
then,
You
yeah.
said it was nonce gum.
Yeah, it is. It's literally for children. It's for children because they eat it like a sweet and then they spit it out after 30 seconds.
I agree. Gum is pointless. You can just replace it with
Yeah.
mints. But that's a reasonable point. Not a reasonable point is saying you're 28 years old. What are you doing trying to extract the maximum pleasure from your short time on Earth? You fucking nonce. Come on.
Also, if there was one person on Football Daily who enjoys childish shit just across the board, more so than anyone else, it's 100% you.
Yeah, it's true. All right, there we go. That's
Is
the
it
end of
over?
Sunday Vibes. That's the end of Sunday Vibes for another week. If you've got any questions, send them to Christopher on Twitter during the week. If you want to watch more Football Daily content, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Go over to EFD as well. And if you want to plug, Christopher?
That last question was from someone on the Discord, the Football Daily Discord. If you want to join them, click the link in the description below. A lovely, tightly knit community of Football Daily subscribers who are very, very helpful.
There we go. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later.
Bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.